Big tech is doubling down on AI. Are we witnessing a platform shift or inflating a bubble that could rattle the economy? In Washington, Donald Trump is urging Republicans to kill the Senate filibuster to break the shutdown, majority rule versus minority veto. Across the pond, Prince Andrew's titles are gone. Strip away the ceremony, and you're left with a failing spokesperson for the monarchy's brand. Back home, a Maryland state senator is indicted in an alleged bedroom blackmail plot. If true, it's surveillance politics at its ugliest. And at the movies, October's box office hits a 27-year low. Weak slate or audience shift? History says new media dens old, it rarely kills it. All that and more today on Filtered.
Welcome to Filtered with TJ Walker.
Hi, and welcome. Thanks for joining the show today. We start in, as we always do, a quick market update. Yesterday, the S&P 500 closed at 6,822.34. That's down 0.99, just less than 1%. The NASDAQ Composite closed at 23,581.14. That's down 1.57%. Always keep in mind the long term. Over the long term, the last 25 years, the S&P 500 has averaged up 7.4% per year. The NASDAQ 100 has averaged 9.73% per year. So please always keep in mind the long term, trying to promote some long-term thinking around here. Let's dive in with issue one today. Big tech's AI bet, vision or bubble risk? Here's the story. Google, Meta, Microsoft, and Amazon are pouring ever more billions of dollars into AI data centers. Even as OpenAI fuels the boom with creative circular financing that sends investor cash right back to cloud and chip suppliers. According to the New York Times, the giant's capital spending and OpenAI's complex deals are raising fresh bubble questions. Microsoft's Amy Hood says demand keeps outpacing capacity. Fed Chair Jerome Powell argues this isn't the 1990s.com. Today's players have profits and real businesses. And Mark Zuckerberg said he'd rather overbuild to be ready for superintelligence. OpenAI's Sam Altman adds that revolutions hinge on financial innovation as much as tech. The upside is historic infrastructure for a new platform shift. The risk is smaller players drowning in debt if AI underdelivers, and a broader shock if financing cracks. According to Times reporting by Karen Weiss and by Jacqueline Gu and Gade Metz, the stakes keep rising, and so do the price tags. Okay, what's the real message here? All the big boys are investing heavily, more and more every day in AI technology. They're going all in on AI, and it is creating a massive shift of where our economy invests its resources. Some of it's going to work out if history plays any role in this, but for a lot of companies, it's going to go poof. They will go bankrupt, and somebody's going to be left holding the bag. Let's dig a little deeper here. So Mark Zuckerberg, love him or hate him, is often a very shrewd business negotiator. He's basically saying that once we get to superintelligence, where computers and artificial intelligence can really think better, faster, wiser than humans and even collective humans, nothing else is going to matter once we get to that point. Whoever gets there and gets there first is going to kind of dominate the whole world. If you don't get there first, you may be tossed into the dustbin of history as irrelevant. So I think that's sort of guiding his philosophy. Let's look at some more of the facts and a little history here. So there's always been massive amounts of money funneled into new technologies. We saw it in railroads in the 1840s in Great Britain. We've seen it in other decades with railroads in Europe and the United States. We saw it with television stations, radio stations. We saw it with automobile manufacturers. People forget 100 years ago, there were 100 plus automobile manufacturers. And about 97% of them went bankrupt. We ended up with about 3 in the United States. So there's nothing new about a new technology exciting people and exciting investors and money really, really piling in. What we haven't figured out yet is how do you do that without causing a bubble and then things bursting and causing a whole lot of carnage for the economy? I have no doubt that somebody's going to win big with AI. It's obviously a hugely important development. Will it completely transform the world? Will we have general artificial intelligence in the last 5 years? I'm going to leave it to others to make predictions on that. But I have no doubt, just based on how I use AI every day, how I use AI to create this show and do so many parts of my life, that it's a huge, huge technology, about 1 billion times more useful than the metaverse or cryptocurrency that got so much hype just a few years ago. But the question is, how many of these businesses are going to make money? Now, what Jerome Powell is saying, there's an element of truth to that, which is this is different from the dot-com boom. The dot-com boom, there were so many companies that had never made a penny in their life, but were just concepts, pets.com. And people said, oh, you put a .com after your name? Here, take tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. That was definitely a bubble, but certainly the internet was real. Certainly internet commerce was real. Now, nobody knew at the time that basically Amazon would be the only one to make money on it, but it doesn't change the fact that internet commerce was real, the internet was real, but so many of those companies ended up losing 100% of their investors' money. Now, this is a little bit different. The scales are much larger. We're not talking about $5 million to a couple of 23-year-olds who have an interesting idea that they gave you on the back of a napkin. Most of those didn't turn out. Some of them did. Now we're talking about not 5 million in venture capital. We're talking about 500 million and then $500 billion. So if some of those things don't work out, there is going to be massive, massive pain. But the biggest companies spending the most money on AI already have huge cash resources. You look at a company like Apple and Google, they've got huge stockpiles of cash. So if this doesn't work out well, it is unlikely that it's going to really bring them under the way a pets.com did. Let's look at some more facts here. Google lifted its 2025 capital expenditure plans to at least $91 billion. They're processing 20 times more AI data year over year right now. That's huge growth. Microsoft spent $35 billion last quarter. They've got $400 billion in contracted future sales. OpenAI has committed $250 million in compute. Meta raised 2025, their spending to $70 billion. And Mark Zuckerberg, as I mentioned to you, has basically said, you got to do whatever it takes to get ready for superintelligence, because that's the fear in the minds of a lot of these CEOs, that someone gets there ahead of them, especially if it's 2 steps ahead of them. Poof. We could see industry, not just company after company, industry after industry go poof, because superintelligence could be that powerful. Now, Sam Altman says something that makes me a little bit nervous. He says, with every great innovation in technology, you innovate the financial model as well. Okay, this is where it gets a little bit dicey. In every great bubble, you often see situations where things only go up and everyone, shoe shine boys, not to knock them, housekeepers, people who barely have enough money to pay their expenses are so excited they're drawn in. They were drawn into the internet bubble. I know countless people is like, oh yeah, I invested all my money in internet stocks. And the bigger problem, when you look back to the 1920s, was all the people investing in the stock market on margin. sometimes as little as 20% down, sometimes a little bit 10% down. Well, that was financial innovation. Didn't turn out very well. By the way, quick plug, I'm in the middle of reading Andrew Ross Sorkin's 1929, which really details this in fascinating, riveting detail. I would urge you to check out that book. So OpenAI's deals loop around. The funding is very circular and has a lot of people scared because the funding loops go to their cloud chip partners, Microsoft, CoreWeave, Oracle. It's stoking concerns that there is, in fact, a bubble. Let's look a little more about the history. As I mentioned, the railroads, massive buildup, over investment. Were railroads important? Did they dramatically improve commerce and capitalism in Europe, in Britain, in the yes, but a lot of people lost a lot of money. So the share prices soared for UK railways in the 1940s, and then boom, it crashed. Automobiles, 1900s to 1920s, hundreds of car makers, as I mentioned. Ultimately, only about 3 really made it in the United States. Radio, people forget about that. In the 1920s, there was a huge craze. People were investing so much money in radio stations, radio antenna. Most of them folded. TV networks. Again, we ended up with 3, but a lot of people tried and failed. Cable TV in the 1980s and 90s, a lot of players all went in, and the big boys survived, but a lot of others were wiped out. And this goes, we see these cycles repeatedly. The Web 2.0 in the mid-2000s, a lot of platforms and other companies sort of came and went. Smartphones and the app boom. There was a time when you just came up with an idea for an app, people would give you money. At this point, no, you got to prove that your app actually works. No one's going to give you money for that. And then the crypto cycles. Don't get me started on crypto. I'm not a fan, but we're going to leave that debate for another day. So where do we go from here? I can't see the future. And if you're honest with yourself, you can't really see the future. We can all make guesses, and I might guess correctly, sometimes out of luck, and you might as well. The only thing I know to do is to try to learn as much as possible about artificial intelligence every single day, to invest not necessarily a lot of money, although I do some, but to invest time really learning this technology, to use it. I'm using artificial intelligence every day. I hope you are as well. We have some workers in the house right now where I don't speak their language. They don't speak mine. What do? I pull up my phone and I have ChatGPT translate it for me in the audio format. It works great. I can't create graphics quickly. The graphic, if you're watching on any social media platform, and apologies to our podcast listeners, but the graphics you're seeing right now, all created by artificial intelligence. The introductory script of what I read to set up this story, created by AI. Now, I fact check it. I had it based on reputable news sources. I typically use the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, Associated Press, reputable news organizations, and give credit, as you've heard. But I couldn't do this. I couldn't even do this show without extensively using artificial intelligence every day. That's why, as you'll see in the ads later, you'll see me hyping my own tjwalker.ai video interactive clone. Is it the be all and end all? Is it going to make me a fortune? I lose money on it, but that's okay. I'm learning about artificial intelligence and about how people like you and others and myself, how we can interact with artificial intelligence on a daily basis. I don't know what else is possible to do other than be in it, learn it, follow the trends, and be ready to act quickly. More in a moment.
Filtered is brought to you by the following. You don't need a new degree. You don't need another expensive coach. You need the right communication habits, and I'll teach them to you in just a few minutes a day. At MediaTrainingWorldwide.com, I've created the most comprehensive library of online communication and personal development courses anywhere. You'll learn public speaking, media training, persuasion, executive presence, and more. These are the same methods I've taught to world leaders, but now they're affordable and accessible to everyone. You can start for free and upgrade anytime. Go now to MediaTrainingWorldwide.com. Confidence isn't a personality trait, it's a skill and it's trainable.
Hey, thank you so much for joining me today. My name is TJ Walker. If this is your first time here, thanks so much for joining me. This is Filtered with TJ Walker. And here's what we do here. We look at typically the top 5 stories of the day, business-related stories, technology, economics, and cultural stories. And then we filter it through the lens of communication and personal development skills. So it's a hybrid show. It's not a pure news show. It's not a pure personal development show. It's a combination. Here's my pledge to you. Spend a little time with me each day, and you'll know more about the important stories shaping our world, and you'll know how to improve yourself to be more successful in your professional life as well as your personal life. I am here as a sane, sensible centrist. That is my agenda. And I bring to you my 40 years of experience as a communications and personal development coach to top leaders, top business leaders around the world, billionaire fund managers, CEOs, also presidents of countries, prime ministers, professional athletes, and people like that. So that's my background, and that's why I'm here. I'd love to hear from you. If you're watching this or listening to this live, you can post comments right here. I'll often call upon you and bring you into the conversation. If you're watching this on demand, then go ahead and leave comments. I typically review all comments and try to respond to most of them. So thanks so much for being a part of the show. Let's dive right into issue 2. Trump urges the GOP to end filibuster to break the shutdown. According to the Times, President Trump late on Thursday night pressed Senate Republicans to play their Trump card and scrap the filibuster to end the federal government shutdown. Republicans have 53 seats in the Senate, but most bills need 60 votes. Democrats are blocking funding that omits reinstating expiring Affordable Care Act subsidies. GOP leaders like John Thune have warned changing the rule could backfire under a future Democratic majority. The demand comes as anti-poverty programs face lapses and ACA shoppers brace for higher prices. Quick explainer here. The filibuster isn't in the Constitution. It's just a rule senators made. For most of U.S. history, a filibuster meant you had to hold the floor. You had to literally stand up and speak and actually debate until a supermajority voted to cut it off. So that's what a lot of people think of, the old Jimmy Stewart movie where Mr. Smith goes to Washington, where he's speaking on and on and on to make his point and to prevent a vote from happening. And we don't have to do that anymore. In the 1970s, the Senate adopted a 2-track system, and in 1975 lowered closer to 60 votes, meaning you had to have 60 votes in order for something to pass. That shift enabled today's so-called silent filibuster. A minority can simply signal an objection, and leaders won't bring a bill to a vote unless it clears 60 votes. Critics call that undemocratic because a minority, often representing fewer voters, can veto majority-supported legislation. And because it's just a rule, a simple majority can change it. Okay, so what's the real message here? Donald Trump is absolutely right to call for an end to the filibuster. He did win the popular election. Republicans did win the Senate and the House. If they really want to take 20 million people off of health care and get rid of food stamps, they've earned the votes to do it. So yes, it's perfectly fine to eliminate the filibuster. It's not written in the Constitution. Let's dig a little deeper here. Now, there are a lot of people who criticize Donald Trump and a lot of his moves over the last 10 months as being authoritarian, being king-like, of trampling the Constitution. This isn't one of those moves. It's actually more democratic to say majority should rule. Now, the reason the Senate does that is every single senator is thinking, well, I want to be in this body till I'm 100 years old, like Strom Thurmond. And there are going to be times when my party's going to be in minority, but I still want a whole lot of power. I still want a lot of lobbyists kissing up to me, campaign contributions, even though my party's not in power. So the way they do that is by giving the minority party power and saying, okay, as long as you can get 41 votes on any issue, you can stop anything you want. So it's profoundly undemocratic. Are there certain virtues to it? Yes. If the filibuster is eliminated today, are there going to be times in the future where legislation is passed that I think is horrible, that could have been stopped from a filibuster and it didn't? Yeah, those are the bricks. So, as I told you before, I'm a sane, sensible centrist. I call it like it is. I'm not here to carry water necessarily for any one party. And in this case, Trump is in the right. He has an agenda. He wants to do what he wants to do. Like it or not, he did win not just the electoral vote, as he did in 2016, but he won the popular vote. People on his team won a clear-cut majority of the Senate, 53 senators to 46 for Democrats, 47 caucusing with the Democratic Party. So they should have the right to pass legislation as they want. Here's the real lesson I think that Democrats need to learn, which is actions have consequences. Inactions have consequences. There were tens of millions of registered voters who were democratically leaning, who couldn't have been bothered to vote in 2024. And many of them now are going to see their health insurance double. Many of them are on SNAP, food stamps, and are not going to have any food next week. Well, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be callous, but actions have consequences. Inactions have. If you say, oh, I don't want to wait in line, I'm not going to vote today. Now you're getting the result of that. And we can go about demographic by demographic. This administration has been called out for seemingly wanting to really pick on Black women, whether it's sicking the Department of Justice on them in the case of Letitia James, whether it is trying to sack the Black woman on the Federal Reserve with trumped up charges of mortgage fraud. It seems like they're always after Black women somehow. Well, guess what? There were millions of Black women who didn't bother to vote in the election last year. I'm sorry, actions have consequences. There are tens of millions of poor people in America who depend on government subsidies, who depend on food stamps, didn't bother to vote last year. Well, there are consequences. And there's plenty of blame to go around. There were millions of voters in the 2016 election, for example, who thought Hillary was too conservative. She wasn't Bernie. She wasn't far left enough. She wasn't far progressive enough. And you know what a lot of them did? They sat on their hands and they allowed Trump to take power. Let's not forget, if Trump had lost the 2016 election, he did lose in the popular vote. If he had lost in the Electoral College, as well as losing by millions of votes in the popular election, which he did, we would have never heard from him again. The Republican Party would have quickly turned and said, well, we tried that. That didn't work. And they would have gone on to another candidate. But they didn't. Because he won, And the margin of victory with just really a few tens of thousands of votes in 2016 could have been completely altered by a lot of the so-called liberals and progressives who said, oh, I'm not going to hold my nose and vote for a mainstream Democrat like Hillary. There's no difference between, I heard it time and time again, there's no difference between Hillary and the Donald. I heard that repeatedly. Well, those people aren't saying that anymore. I think they realize there's a pretty big difference. So, look, folks, I've spent a fair amount of time on this show, and a lot of other shows have talked about the rise of authoritarianism, the destructions of basic democratic principles. This isn't one of them. Saying that voters have the right to select their members of Congress and their senators, and then those senators have the right to vote for or against certain legislation, and it should be a majority rule. That is democracy. You could certainly argue, as many have, that the filibuster is inherently undemocratic. It gives power, excessive power, to the minority. And I just don't know how you can, with one out of one side of your mouth, attack the current administration for being authoritarian and ripping the shreds of democracy. On the other hand, say, how dare they suggest we get rid of the filibuster? The Senate doesn't really want to do it because all of the senators, especially Republicans, are looking forward to the day when they don't have Donald Trump around. Trust me. They won't say it publicly. They're afraid of all the threats they'll get. But they're looking forward to that day. They also realize there's a day when they might not hold power in the majority. So they want to keep that filibuster. But if Trump tells them they got to do it, I think they will do it, which means the government can open back up, which is certainly good to all the government employees now who are trying to survive, figuring out, how do I pay my rent? How do I buy groceries right now? I haven't been paid in more than a month. It will be good for at least some of the people who might get their food stamps in the SNAP program. And for the 20 million Americans who are going to see your healthcare cost double, again, actions have consequences. If you didn't want that, you should have voted for a party that was committed to keeping the status quo on healthcare, not doubling, because let's give credit where credit is due. The Trump administration was pretty transparent in their campaign. And while they didn't hold it up and wave it, the Project 2025 laid this all out. Anyone who's paying attention would realize that the plan all along was to cut government spending for anyone who needs any kind of subsidy for anything, especially healthcare. And now the chickens have come home to roost. So if you don't like it, yeah, you can go have another King's Day parade if you want, if it makes you feel better. And I'm not opposed to those things. But at some level, you're going to have to vote. You're going to have to get out the vote. The problem with so many centrists in America and liberals and progressives and those on the left is they think, okay, something happened I think is bad. I'm going to file a lawsuit, or I'm going to depend on some kind of trick like a filibuster, where even though I can't maintain popular support and get the votes I want in terms of majority, there's going to be a backdoor way. And also during elections, if a candidate I don't like is running against another candidate who's with me 90% of the time but isn't 100%, I can just sit out and be pure. That's the kind of mindset that has the Democrats in deep, deep trouble right now. We'll be monitoring this. This is a big issue. Thanks so much for staying with me. What are your comments? You can leave your comments now. We'll add it to the conversation. We'll be back with issue 3 in just a moment. Filtered is brought to you by the following. Want to advertise here? You better be legit. No crypto, no junk food, no supplements. Go to tjwalker.com/advertise. Want to become a better speaker, leader, or communicator? Start with the TJ Walker Success Library. It's 5 of my most practical books
covering everything from public speaking to media interviews and persuasive messaging, all for only $9.95. I've trained presidents and Fortune 500 CEOs, and now you can get the same wisdom in a fast, affordable format. Go to tjwalker.com/books and download your copies instantly. Thanks for listening. If you like today's episode, you'll love my online courses at MediaTrainingWorldwide.com. Check them out now and level up your skills.
Welcome back to Filtered Issue 3, Prince Andrew. Bad PR for a fading brand. Here's the story. According to the New York Times, King Charles III has moved to, and I feel silly using a title like King, but more about that in a moment. He has moved to strip Prince Andrew's style, titles, and honors, saying he will now be known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, and evicting him from Royal Lodge to a smaller home in Sandringham. The palace said, quote, "These censures are deemed necessary," citing serious lapses of judgment tied to the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. Let's add context. Monarchies today are mostly marketing machines built on an old premise of divine selection. And let me translate that in simple terms. It means, first of all, you believe in an all-powerful God, and you believe in a God who says, all the things to do, I'm going to pick a leader for a country. And I'm going to pick the absolute best, most brilliant person and family to rule in my name over people in a country. That's what divine selection is about. Now, if you don't buy that premise, titles are basically nonsense. They're branding. It's not legitimacy. By that standard, Andrew isn't a statesman. He's merely a spokesperson for the British brand, and it's a failed one. He's a failed spokesperson. In a modern democracy, you don't fix a reputational crisis by shuffling titles and honorifics. You fire the spokesperson. Keep the accountability. Skip the theater. As the Times notes, this is the sharpest royal demotion since Edward VIII, less about sacred lineage, more about damage control for a struggling institution. What's the real message here? Yes, shame on the former Prince Andrew for spending all of his time fooling around with Epstein and little girls. But the real shame is on you and me pretending that there is such a thing as princes and kings in the modern world. It's all just made up stuff. It's just a figment of people's imagination. There is no God above picking out leaders to rule in his name in societies and countries and say, oh, Prince Charles or Prince Edward, they're my guy to rule. It's complete nonsense. It's as nonsensical as me telling you, from now on, you will refer to me as Lord TJ, master of the universe, who has the greatest, curliest, thickest hair in the world. If I told you to refer to me with that title and you said, TJ, that's insane, you're really stupid, you would be absolutely right. Okay, let's dig a little bit deeper here. I understand why the United Kingdom keeps up their monarchy. They don't have real power, but they are great for generating publicity. The United Kingdom and London and Buckingham Palace generates so much money for this country from tourism. So many people, little girls, little boys, that read fairy tales about queens and kings and princes and princesses, and wow, they still have them. Let's go see it. So they get a lot of publicity, and it generates tremendous amounts of tourism. I've seen various accounts that says if you factor in all the money spent supporting these welfare recipients, which is really what Prince Charles and Prince Andrew are, they're welfare recipients. They live in government housing. If you add up all the money you spend, but you look at the return on investment when it comes to increased tourism, they're a great deal. I mean, let's face it, here in the United States, all sorts of states, cities put together advertising campaigns and they promote it around the world or in different markets trying to attract tourism. And England doesn't have to do that much. They just get constant reams of publicity for whatever their king or queen or princesses are doing. They like it to be positive publicity. And when so much of the publicity about Prince Andrew is about his the alleged rape he committed with one of the children that Jeffrey Epstein recruited, that's not good publicity. No one's really saying, hey, let's fly to England this summer, spend our summer vacation there, and go to the house of that pedophile. That's not really attracting a lot of extra customers and consumers and spenders. So it's pretty sad that we even have this situation. Now, I want to, sorry to sound grumpy today, but this is something that really sticks in my craw. I understand if you are a British citizen, say, okay, it's my country, it's my tradition. We have this tradition of our kings and our queens and our monarchy, and yet we have our parliament. It's all a part of this. Okay, you get a pass on this. But what I don't get is why Americans fall all over themselves, whether it's meeting Princess Di or Prince or King Charles. Why should American media even use these titles? It's just made up stuff based on faulty premise. Shame on me for even talking about King Charles. He's Charlie to me and you. Sorry. Or, Mr. Windsor, whatever his last name is. But the idea that someone deserves respect because they've been able to spin a yarn that somehow they or their ancestors were selected by God to rule over people. I hate to tell you, my fellow Americans, that's why we revolted. That's why there was a revolution in 1776. We as a society decided that's complete BS. We're not buying into it. We don't buy into this idea that any one person has been selected by any invisible deity to rule over others. So it also sticks in my craw that anybody, and I mean anybody, would ever tune into a show that, Prince Harry or his wife, in a sane, rational world, someone like Prince Harry would be an assistant manager at a Chevrolet car dealership, making $49,000 a year. I'm not saying he's an awful person. He certainly doesn't seem to be at the level of Prince Andrew. But why anyone thinks he deserves honors or titles, or what we need to breathlessly follow their every move, is an absolute absurdity in my view. What do you think? Post your comments right here if you're watching live, if you're watching on TikTok, on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, X. We're simulcasting on most every major social media platform, also available through Podbean to stream live on podcasting. If you prefer podcasting, if you're watching this on demand or listening to it on demand, then please leave your comments there. And please, if you are listening on a podcast, be sure to follow and subscribe to the show. And, it'd be really helpful. We're not quite at our 2-month birthday, so we're still very new. If there's any way you could leave a review, old TJ would really appreciate it. So thank you so much for giving that consideration. More in a moment.
Filtered is brought to you by the following. Get the deeper takes I don't post anywhere else. Subscribe now at substack.com/@TJWalkerSuccess and stay in the loop. For years, people have asked how they could get one-on-one coaching from me inexpensively. Well, now you can, anytime, anywhere with the TJ Walker AI clone. It's like having me in your pocket, ready to help you prep for a speech, polish a pitch, or calm your nerves before a big meeting. You talk to it, it responds like I would, based on my real-world coaching of thousands of leaders and communicators. Check it out at tjwalker.ai. It's not just smart, it's personal. Want to support the show? Skip the ads and buy me a coffee. That's buymeacoffee.com/TJWalker.
Welcome back to Filter. One last note on that last story regarding former Prince Andrew. I hear from so many of my students around the world on who take my time management courses, personal productivity courses. How can I be more productive? How can I be more? Here's one quick tip for you. Never, ever, ever waste time reading any news story or watching or listening to any news story that has anything to do with the British royal family or any other family. And I realize I'm violating that rule right now, but it's to make a larger point. Because here's one promise I do give you, or your money back today. If you never ever learn anything about Prince Andrew, King George, King Charles, Meghan, if you never ever know anything about these people and you're at a cocktail party and someone brings it up, wants to ask your opinion, you know absolutely nothing, here is my guarantee to you: nothing bad will happen to you. Nothing important for your life that will affect your happiness, your wealth, your success, your creativity has anything to do with even knowing the names of any of these royals. So let's give it a rest. Moving on to the next issue. This is a wild, wacky one. Indicted. Maryland state senator accused of bedroom blackmail plot. Here's the story. It's a doozy. The Daily Mail reports Maryland state senator Dahlia Altar has been indicted on not one, but 8 federal counts of extortion and conspiracy after prosecutors say she helped secretly film 2 critics in bed and threatened to release the footage to silence them during the 2020 and 2022 election cycles. According to the indictment, Attar, her brother Joseph Attar, and Baltimore officer Kalman Finkelstein allegedly planted hidden cameras disguised as smoke detectors and used a car tracker. Prosecutors say the target was a political consultant Attar once worked with. Messages cited in the filing describe threats to share this video with everybody you know, every rabbi in town. Attar denies wrongdoing, calling the allegations from a former disgruntled employee and saying, "I would never knowingly jeopardize my constituents' trust." Maryland Senate leadership says it holds members to the highest ethical standards while facts are reviewed. Okay, what's the real message here? Yes, modern technology does allow you to track people and secretly videotape you. But guess what? It's really hard to keep secrets secret. If you do sneaky, underhanded things trying to destroy other human beings, as this Maryland state senator did, you are the one likely to see your own career destroyed first. Let's dig a little deeper here, because this to me well, it didn't happen to me or anyone I know, and perhaps it's wrong of me, but it does seem at some level funny to go to this extreme. But these are serious charges, 8 felony indictments. Look, if you want to enter public life as a state senator, as a political candidate anywhere, even as a YouTuber or a TikToker, guess what? People are going to criticize you. If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. If you can't take criticism, just stay behind the scenes. There's nothing wrong with that. You can live a quiet, humble life. Let other people take the spotlight. But a part of the spotlight means people are going to criticize you. And these days, if you try to push that criticism down, if you try to hide it, if you try to sweep it under the rug, it's going to come back to haunt you. That is going to be the bigger story. The old mantra in the Watergate era, it's not the crime, it's the cover-up. If you're trying to cover up or hide people who've said nasty things about you, the mud is going to get on you. And in this particular case, I don't purport to be an expert on all Maryland state politics, but I can imagine, even if the senator doesn't get convicted, it doesn't destroy her career, or frankly, be the first thing anyone ever thinks about. let's say, for example, she's able to stay in office. Every cocktail party, every policy meeting she ever goes to, the first thing in people's heads is going to be, better watch myself. I don't want to be video recorded doing anything naughty. People are going to be laughing behind her back forever. And again, she could be proven innocent, but we will see. But this seems to be an extraordinarily extreme ethical breach, legal breach. When you're setting people up, videotaping them in, doing sexual things, bad things are going to happen to you. Now, this happened to Jared Kushner's father. He was in a family dispute and essentially did this with another individual, got caught in the setup, and it really came back to haunt them. Let's take some comments are coming in, and user 618 writes, "We are paying big time now. WEF controlled." Okay, if you want to elaborate on that, I'm not sure which story you're referring to. Alan writes, "What are we up to, TJ?" Well, we're up to what I love doing every single day. We're looking at the top stories of the day, filtering it through the lens of communication skills and media skills and personal development skills. So this particular issue involves a state senator, a Democratic state senator in Maryland, who is alleged to have video recorded a former ally, an opponent who became an opponent, who apparently is alleged to have been having an affair with a married man. She wanted to stop the criticism. And now, instead of getting a little bit of criticism that maybe a handful of people in her district know, she's getting criticism from the entire world. So that is the problem when you go that extreme. Fish says, "I'm looking forward to the day the left wing of the Democratic Party goes away." Okay, if you want to elaborate on that, fine. My challenge to you would be, define who you think that is, because certainly you could make the case that Bernie Sanders, AOC are members of the left-wing party. Guess what? They don't have any real power. One of the things I heard from every left-winger, every strong progressive in America that I talked to, is that they didn't consider Joe Biden or Kamala Harris to be left-wing. They consider them too centrist, too mainstream, too pro-corporate, and they weren't very excited about them. So there is a big fight right now going on in the Democratic Party as they anticipate and gear up for what might be an election in 2028. Should they go further left and excite a base, or should they go for someone who's seen as really centrist, like a Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, a Democrat who is wildly popular in a Republican state? So that's a debate we'll be following very closely on this show right here. Tupman says, "No one cares about kings. It's all about merit." That's the way I think it should be, referring to an earlier story. But then why are so many people watching a Prince Harry podcast or a movie? Why do people swoon when Princess Diana came to the United States, a quarter of a century, 30 years ago? People do care about monarchy. I think they shouldn't if they actually believe in democracy. To me, it's the two are completely contradictory. All right, we've got more issues to cover today, plus a grab bag section. So lots more to come. Please stay tuned, and we are taking your questions, and I'll be answering some of your questions directly at the end of the show that relate to communication and personal development, as I always do. So all that and more today, right here on Filter. Want to communicate like a pro? Go to MediaTrainingWorldwide.com. Millions have already transformed their speaking skills. Why not you? This show doesn't run on a lot of corporate sponsorships or big media backing. It runs on caffeine and your support. If you like what you're hearing and want to say thanks, you can buy me a coffee. Really. Just go to buymeacoffee.com/TJ Walker.
It's quick, it's easy, and yes, it helps cover editing, hosting, and staying relatively ad-free for as long as possible. Buymeacoffee.com/TJ Walker. Your $3.95 makes a real difference.
Welcome back to Filtered. Box Office Massacre. No, that's not the name of a late big time Hollywood movie about some horror movie. No, that's what's actually happening in the box office. It's being massacred. Why October tanked and what it really means. According to the Hollywood Reporter, October's domestic box office is set to finish around $425 million, which may sound like a lot. It's the weakest October in 27 years, including 2020. Believe it or not, that's hard to imagine. Pamela McClintock reports a perfect storm, fewer releases after strike delays, weak August and September carryover, and fall event films that didn't really connect. Tron Eris leads the month at 63 million domestic, and October leader low not seen since 2005. While Dwayne Johnson's The Smashing Machine sits at $11 million domestic sales. Analyst Eric Handler notes Mortal Kombat 2 being pushed to May created a hole. ComScore's Paul Dergabedian says the heat is now on November titles to bridge to the holidays. Big picture, grim month, yes, but media history says new formats usually erode old ones. They don't really erase them completely. Radio survived TV, broadcast survived cable, cable survives streaming, shrunken, but still anchored by live sports and news. Theaters aren't dead. They're starved for consistent, compelling supply. That, and there's some other issues too. Okay. What's the real message behind all these box office bombs? Nobody going to movie theaters anymore. A part of it is the movie experience is awful. I hate going to movies because some jerk next to me wants to check his Facebook update right in the climax of the movie. That's a part of it. The other problem is TVs have gotten better and better and better and bigger and cheaper at home. Why go to the time and expense to the movie theater when so many people have great home theaters? Okay, let's dig a little deeper here and look at some of the facts. The numbers are grim when it comes, it's not, maybe not as grim as Broadway musicals, where 100% have lost money, new Broadway musicals in the last year. We're not quite at the point where 100% of movies are losing money, but we are seeing a tremendous contraction. That's not surprising. I mean, radio contracted when TV came out. When cable TV came out, broadcast TV lost some of its audience. When the internet came out, cable TV and broadcast lost audience. So typically, you see media build on each other, but not always. We don't see people sending a lot of telegrams anymore. We don't see people paying to send messages in Morse code anymore. So there are times, we don't see vaudeville really either, a particular medium of expression. So there are times when a medium just becomes obsolete. Hecky says part of the reason is high prices. Yes, movies are very high compared to what you can get at home. There's also the little known fact that you can now get any movie ever made at home, on your cell phone, on your computer, on your big screen. There was an ad promoting the wondrous powers of the internet. It was a broadband company. I don't even think it's around anymore. This ad came out 25 years ago, and someone was checking into an old, dingy, dirty, cheap-looking motel, really, that was decrepit. The pool was nasty. And the person checking in was essentially saying, no pool, no this, no that, but we have every single movie ever made available in your hotel room. And this blew people's minds. I remember thinking, wow, Would we ever live in a fantasy world like that? Well, now it's just common sense because, yeah, everybody has access to every movie ever made. So if the issue is what am I going to do tomorrow night, a Saturday night, if I could go out to a movie, chances are they're cartoon movies and comic book movies that have no interest in me to me. Or I could look at Godfather Part 2, or I could rewatch one of my favorite movies, The Sweet Smell of Success, or A Face in the Crowd. I'd much rather watch one of the greatest movies ever, which I can now do with the push of a button. And many times, if it's a streaming service, I'm not paying any extra money. And even if I do have to buy the movie on Amazon or Apple, I can often rent it for $3.95. That won't even pay for the parking going to a movie theater. So, yeah, I think the movies are in big, big trouble. And because of that, smart, creative people are not dashing out to Hollywood to do whatever it takes to be the assistant to the assistant director to pay their dues for 10 years so they can eventually be an assistant director and maybe make one movie by the time they're 50. They're not doing that. They're doing what Mr. Beast did, staying in their small town in North Carolina or Iowa or whatever, and they're taking creative storytelling abilities using video and they're creating it on YouTube, on TikTok, on Instagram. That's the new movie world. I don't think that's going to change. So my real advice to you is if you are serious about your career, it's the old Wayne Gretzky line. You got to go where the puck is going. The puck is not going to more movie theaters. It's just not. It's so expensive. It's so hard to get a crowd. In order to get people to even be aware of your movie and to get a babysitter or to make a date and to drive across town and park and go into a theater, these days, quite often you have to spend hundreds of millions of dollars of advertising to make that happen. Guess how much money Mr. B spends on advertising to get people to watch his videos hundreds of millions of times? He spends zero. He spends $0, much less costly and less risky. So if you are sincere about a career as a creative voice, I would urge you, don't put all your eggs in the basket of being a feature filmmaker where your movies have to be seen on the big screen because the audiences aren't going, the cost structure is going up. There's more consolidation in the movie industry than ever. And at some point, you're going to wake up one day after you perhaps were really successful and raised $50 million for your movie. And finally, you maybe get it out. And you're going to go to the box office to see the results the next week. And what you're going to find is some 17-year-old made a completely AI-generated movie about, two candy bars fighting each other in a TikTok arena. And that person will have made $100 million and you will have made nothing. And they spent zero creating their movie. I think that is the world we are headed in. And it's just going to be tough. I mean, you can't get a comedy made anymore. Ben Stiller has talked about this. Will Ferrell has talked about the so-called middle range movies that are not gigantic Mission Impossible car chase and blowing up and extreme things. If it's not a cartoon, a Marvel comic book thing, you're not going to get the movie made. So focus on what really matters. A creative vision. If it's video, great, but realize it doesn't have to necessarily be on a big screen. So always look at where's the technology going? Where are the opportunities going? Where's the growth? There is growth right here on YouTube. There is growth on TikTok. There is growth on podcasting platforms. We live in a world now where, as Scott Galloway has said, every podcast is becoming a TV show. Every TV show is becoming a podcast. I'm attempting to be living proof of that as my show starting Monday is going to be available on Roku TV sets, on Amazon Fire TV sets. So I'm looking forward to that and a new partnership with Pod TV. So I'm in a field where it's expanding. Doesn't mean I'm ever going to be as big as James Cameron. But if James Cameron started out today, the big question is, would he even be able to get his first movie in the theaters? I don't know. That concludes our main section of the show today, but there's a lot more stuff in the news that I have to talk about. So we're going to try to cover these relatively quickly. We're going to go to our grab bag section now. Puck buys airmail, but the investors are underwater. Puck, which is a media company, is acquiring Graydon Carter's airmail in a deal valuing the newsletter at $16 million, paid largely in Puck stock. Now, airmail raised $32 million since 2019. So on headline value, early investors are down at least 50%. Now, the headcount is small, only about 34 employees, underscoring how expensive audience building has been in this niche. Elite subscription media keeps consolidating, but the exit doesn't clear the invested capital. The strategic bet now is whether Puck can actually convert combined audiences into higher subscription yield and better ad rates. Okay, this is just a fancy way of saying a guy you've maybe never heard of, but is really famous in media circles and Hollywood circles, Graydon Carter. He's the guy who was the editor of Vanity Fair for years and years and years, had big parties after the Oscars, and every famous celebrity would come and kiss his hand. Well, he got ousted at some point and has moved on to other things, and hey, good for him. He's written books, started restaurants. I've been to his restaurants, and he's a big man about town in a place like New York City and Hollywood. He started his newsletter, but he was still used to the old days, the Condé Nast days, where everything is big time, big offices, limousines, first class travel. And he went out and raised money, which he could do it. Good for him. I don't think this is the model for the future. The cost structure is such that it's just too expensive. As I mentioned, he raised $32 million. He just sold it for substantially less. It was just sold for $16 million, which means pretty much every investor lost a lot of money. Now, it's true. I'm not looking at the covenants in there. There's always some investors who may have said, I get 100% back if there's ever any sale ahead of all other investors. But typically, in a situation like this, they lost money. Now, this is a newsletter. Why in the world you need 34 employees to do a weekend text newsletter is bizarre to me. I think the future of media is lean startups, people who dive into a subject, covering it because they're compelled to, they're fascinated by it. And they're investing their time, blood, sweat, and tears into it. It builds an audience and grows. And then they reinvest revenues from advertising partnerships elsewhere into it, making it bigger and bigger and bigger. That's how most of the really successful podcasters have done it. That's how most of the really successful YouTubers have done it. They didn't go out and raise a lot of money. So Graydon Carter's had a fantastic career, but he is still sort of old school in a way that I don't think works unless you're as famous as Graydon Carter. And if you're watching this, chances are you're not. And I'm not. So my advice to you, if you want to start a media company or even be in the media, just start. Start creating content that you have a passion for and an interest in, and that other people find of value. Do that. Do it long enough, and you may get to the point where A, it's profitable, B, you can sell it to a bigger company. But I think the Graydon Carter model is wrong. Next item in the grab bag. This is bizarre. The Times of London did an entire story interviewing the former mayor of New York City, Bill de Blasio. And it turns out it wasn't Bill de Blasio. It was just a guy who had ChatGPT craft answers. It was an embarrassment for the media company. But I think we may see a lot more of this, because with the ability of artificial intelligence to clone voices, I got to tell you, the way my own AI clones my voice, It sounds just like me most of the time. You can easily see a situation where there's two candidates running for office. One of them says, hey, let's make the other candidate look really bad. Let's clone his voice, which you can do publicly from audio clips in the internet, create a script, feed it into that AI, and then have our clone of this other candidate call the number one political reporter in our town, let's say 3 days before the election, and have him announce that I am exiting the campaign due to personal problems because of my massive cocaine addiction. And it sounds just like the actual politician. The reporter's like, I talked to this guy a million times. That's TJ. I can see this happening, and it's going to be a big, big problem. There's going to have to be some additional verification anytime reporters are talking to someone over the phone. We may even get to the point where you need verification in person with robots and clones getting so widespread. I think we're still a little bit off from there, but a bit of a black eye for the Times of London. Fortunately, it's not going to change anything in the upcoming New York City mayor's race, because it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican, very few people have any interest whatsoever in what former Mayor Bill de Blasio said. In our remaining time, I want to help you even more. What we do at the end of every show now is I take questions from you and my online students on some aspect of personal development or communication skills, because that is my primary background. For the last 40 years, I've helped people like you and executives around the world learn how to communicate more effectively and have better personal development skills, either through my in-person workshops or through my 300 online courses, which more than 12 million student enrollments have gone through. So let's take a question right now. This is a question from Saptar, who is a student in my course on the complete communication skills. How can I improve my pronunciation so that I can speak more clearly and confidently? Well, Saptar, if you're concerned about the clarity of speaking, you're not alone. Many people have that. I would argue most people have that problem at some point. The number one problem when it comes to being understood and being clear is lowering your volume too much. When you lower your volume because you're a little nervous or uncertain or lacking confidence, it's instantly much harder for people to understand you. So with so many of my clients around the globe, they completely clear up the problem of being understood and speaking clearly just by boosting their volume. The problem for most people, you don't really know how loud you're speaking. That's why it is essential for you to video record yourself, or at least audio record yourself, and listen to yourself. It's also why it's essential, if you're not completely comfortable speaking in a meeting and you know you're giving a presentation on what your department has done in the last month, or you're making a request for allocation of resources for a new project, it's essential that you rehearse it on video. Because here's what happens. If you're a little bit nervous, your body tightens up, your vocal cords tighten up. It brings your volume down, and it makes you flatter and more monotone, and therefore harder to understand, and frankly, harder to just even pay attention to, because it gets boring. So you need to practice on video and really listen to it. Most of the time, when I do that with clients, their first reaction is, wow, I can barely hear myself. I can barely understand myself. I sound nervous and timid. I can't hear myself. I said, okay. If you can't hear yourself, no one else can either. Let's do it again. Boost your volume. Let's make it artificially louder than normal. Here's what I say that changes the frame for so many of my clients. It's not that I want you to start yelling like this and sounding bombastic. It's not that I want you to yell. But when you are giving a presentation in a business situation and you want to make sure you're coming across clear and confident, think of how you speak to three or four friends and you're at a noisy restaurant and there's a birthday party over here and there's music going on over there and you're telling a story about something funny that happened with all of you, you're not yelling, but you're more animated than usual. You're projecting. There's a bigger range in your voice than if it's just a quiet little room and you're sitting next to your boss 2 feet away. So I want you to have that level of energy in your voice. That clears up the problem. Now, here's another solution that I want you to try. If you genuinely feel like you're not coming across as articulate, I want you to look at some newscaster or talk show host you admire or respect. Watch them, listen to them speak for 30 seconds, and then try to find the transcript, because if it's on YouTube or anyplace else, it's very easy to get a transcript. Then I want you to read the same thing and record it. Listen to the person you admire and respect speak, then listen to how it sounds when you say the same thing. Listen for the difference. Do it again. Try to mimic the person you admire and respect. Now, in the real world, I don't want you mimicking a news anchor or anyone else, but to simply learn the fundamentals of how to come across as more articulate, it can be an extremely useful exercise to mimic someone you respect who has great clarity. So try those two techniques. And Saptar, let me know how it goes. I do wish you well. And thank you so much for writing. Thanks for joining me today. This concludes Filtered with TJ Walker. Please do me a favor. Leave a review on whatever platform you're watching. Leave comments. Sign up for notifications. Tell me what you like about the show. Tell me what you don't like about the show. If I got the facts wrong anywhere, please fact check me. We want to make this show better and better every day with you. I'll be back live again tomorrow. That's right. No rest for the weary. I'm here 7 days a week. Why? Because there's interesting news stories going on every day. See you here tomorrow.